And that's a big part of the book. Is just that whole experience. But then was told, hey, your season's over. There's a standard and you just weren't there. And it was like that it just was over. I came in thinking I've got 5 years, and then it's my first race, my fourth year, and it's done. So definitely was kind of a smack in the face to go from that was the expectation. And then, to have it end a little bit shorter than where I was hoping was definitely a challenge.
Welcome to the Retired Athlete Mentality Podcast, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories of former collegiate athletes who have transitioned from the competitive world of college sports to the grueling but rewarding world of endurance racing. Each episode, we bring on athletes who have gone from courts, fields, and tracks to marathons, triathlons, and even ultras. School's back in session. Welcome to the show. What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Retired Athlete Mentality Podcast. I'm your host, Jamal from Running State University, and on this episode, we have Preston Ruth from the University of Tennessee, where he primarily ran the 800-meter distance. While at Tennessee, he competed at a high level and was a three-time All-SEC Academic Honor Roll member while earning a degree in Industrial System Engineering and a minor in Engineering Management. Now he works full-time as an engineering project manager while serving as a personal trainer, running coach, church youth leader, and recently published his first book in 2025. Preston, let's talk about your retired athlete mentality. How have you been?
Good. Thanks for having me on today.
Of course. Let's get straight to it. And so, like we do in the very beginning of all these podcasts, we talk about when running became your thing. Did you grow up playing other sports, or was running your sport of choice?
I played a lot of sports growing up. I was really into basketball. That was kind of the dream of what I wanted to go do. So I played basketball all the way through high school. Running was something I picked up in middle school, mainly because of my granddad was a major marathoner for some time. My dad was a track athlete at Tennessee as well. And so kind of always had looked up to them and saw that they did track. And we had the middle school mile in PE class. And I ended up running the fastest time in the grade. And I was like, you know what, let's try distance. Because I was kind of convinced that I was a sprinter when I was back in, third, fourth grade. But, got to middle school and, tried out the distance. And that was kind of when I picked up running and kind of kept doing it since.
Yeah, I think everybody has a story for their middle school mile, whether it's a good one or a bad one.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the middle school mile projected you into your career that you can talk about today, which we'll talk about soon. And so when you started doing track, for football, baseball, basketball, those sports, they generally have some sort of methodology on getting to get recruited. And so, high school football, club soccer, high school soccer, baseball. Did you do anything that involved that process for track, or was it just all high school recruiting?
It was mainly high school recruiting. I mean, I think probably freshman year of high school was the first time I was like, I think I could go run in college. The guy who was my sixth grade coach in middle school had told me that. And I think we often need someone else to see potential in us before we see it, in ourselves. And he kind of made that comment. That was the first time it was planted in my mind of like, man, I think I could go do this in college. And so as, high school kind of went forward, I started to reach out to coaches my sophomore year, which at that time was before they could talk to us. So most of the emails back were just, hey, we can't talk to you this time. Here's our standards. I probably sent like 50 emails, just found the biggest schools I could. I wasn't even close to running the times that they sent, but it was just more of like, I'm going to, shoot my shot with as many coaches as I can. And then as kind of got into my junior year was more of when I started to get some messages and some emails, all smaller schools, but really had my eyes set on Tennessee. And so they got a new recruiting coordinator going into my senior year. And I went down to, the campus and had a meeting with him and just kind of fostered that relationship. And I think that helped a lot, but didn't have a lot of camps, things that I went to growing up to help exposure wise. And I think with running, in some ways it's very objective where times speak for themselves. So, there is the eye test in some ways, but I think a lot of it is you run the time or you don't. And so with mile split, with a lot of, now it's even different than it was 8-9 years ago, but you're able to see times for a kid and there's not the need to necessarily go to an in-person camp.
Yeah, no, I kind of love that about track and field which is, you run the time and that kind of puts you in, let's call
Yeah.
it a tier.
Yeah.
And so as long as you continue to see improvement, and that's what coaches will probably see, you'll start to get those calls
Mhm.
automatically, which is
Yeah.
kind of nice.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to the one thing you said about I think you said sixth grade teacher who said like, hey, you have the potential. And I just want to highlight that I love that. And, this could come from parents or, friends and families. But I think when it comes from someone outside of your inner circle, it's super important and just changes your trajectory mentally on what you think you can do in the future. And so I think that's always good to hear that, someone from your middle school saw the potential in you for 6 years later,
Yeah.
which is super cool.
1,000%. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so you get to Tennessee, and Tennessee is in the SEC,
Mhm.
which is a powerhouse for track and field.
Yep.
Can you talk about your experience at Tennessee while running?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of a wild time because COVID hit my freshman year. So, like spring freshman year, my track season was canceled. I ended up having 3 different 800 coaches in 4 years. And so there was some turnover there. And I mean, the biggest key to success as like a runner is consistency. So when you have 3 different, like training styles in the course of 4 years, it definitely is not the recipe for success. I came in as like a local guy who was a walk-on, who was recruited based off of potential. So I kind of came in and had something to prove. I wasn't handed the same opportunities as some of the other guys who ran really fast times and were coming into college and were kind of slated to be our main guys, in the 800. So I was kind of always had my back against the wall and kind of was in a hole that I had to crawl out of, to kind of prove myself. So in some ways it was very challenging, but at the same time, I think it really built the mental strength, saw the saw the reward of staying consistent. It didn't always go the way that I wanted it to, but I can look back and I'm proud of the career that I put together, and I think a lot of it was just the man I was when I walk out of the doors, more than just the times that I hit on the track. So, yeah, that's kind of a bit of an overview of it.
Yeah, I like to say that track and field is probably one of the harder sports that you have in college sports because, when you consider a mid distance to distance runner, that runner may be doing cross country,
Mhm.
indoor and outdoor.
Yep.
I
Yep.
don't know if you did cross country at Tennessee, but it's it's a long season.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the end of the track season goes past the end of the school year, I believe, with nationals and competing for, conference championships. And so I think track and field is one of the harder on the student sports when it comes to sports in college.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't run cross country. I was mainly just an indoor and outdoor guy, but we
Yeah,
trained all,
still,
all through the fall. I
yeah,
mean, I think I tell people, I'm like, I think I ran 340 days of the year. It was
yeah,
like we had our 2 weeks off and then there might be a couple of rest days there, but it was like you're going year round. And so it definitely took you had to be so locked in, so disciplined, so focused, all the variables that it takes to be, like a good runner are things to focus on just because you have to hold that for so long. We had our peak seasons where we're trying to be in our best shape, but
yeah,
there was running that was taking place for that much of the year. And that was my first time where I focused solely on running was when I got to college, because I'd played
yeah,
other sports all the way through. So, it definitely was an adjustment.
yeah. That's wild. Indoor, outdoor, summer, then straight into workouts, 340 plus days a year.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you time to kind of sit back.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then you finished your season. Did you take a fifth year or did you?
Yeah, so I was granted a fifth year because of COVID,
Yep.
but coming off of our third year, our whole coaching staff got fired, and
Yeah.
my third season was my best season. I ran a 152 in like the 800, which now
Yeah.
is like decent high school time. Like it's
Yeah.
the track inflation
Yeah.
is crazy, but I came from that third year, and our whole group was at a really good spot. I was excited for this fourth year and possibly a fifth year. The goal was to go under 150 in the 800, and then the new coaching staff that came in, I got hurt. I bulged a disc in my back, and was out for like 3.5 months, rehabbed, came back. The coaching staff had told me that I was not going to be able to come back to run for my 5th year, and then came back, ran one race, and they told me like, hey, your season's over. And so
Oh,
that 4th year, like going into that 4th year, I'm like, I've got 2 more years. And
yeah,
so to have the injury happen, to come back, to work really hard to get back and to be healthy and in decent enough shape to run at 800, and definitely was aggressive in that rehab. I probably didn't take all the time off that I truly needed to get back, to 100%. But I was
sure.
like, I'm going to run this year. And then did the one race. And that's a big part of the book. It's just that whole
Yeah,
experience. But then was told, hey, your season's over. There's a standard and you just weren't there. And it was like
yeah,
that it just was over. I came in thinking I've got 5 years. And then it's my first race, my 4th year, and it's done. So definitely was kind of a smack in the face to go from that was the expectation. And then, to have it end a little bit shorter than where I was hoping was definitely a challenge. But yeah.
yeah. And how did you get through that? You essentially had to go back to being, like a normal student. Did you feel like you lost a little bit of your identity, or did you just kind of enjoy the fact that you weren't grinding, 340 days a year?
Yeah, I feel like it's a mix, but especially at first, it was definitely feeling lost. Whether you want to admit it or not, like your sport becomes a part of who you are when you've done it for so long. That was my 10th season of track. That was a lot of who I was. And so when that ended, it was definitely a shock. And I think that time was kind of when my faith in Jesus Christ had really had taken a turn, because for a while, it was like my worth was solely in my sports and how well I did in school, and all these things that aren't a strong foundation if that is what I believe your life is built upon. And so that season, there was a lot of things that changed. I had a lot of friends who had graduated and finished their 4th year. I moved back home for that 5th year of school. I was no longer on the track team. There was just a lot of things that changed to where it was like completely different season. And the Lord was really kind in that season to me. And I kind of found, my worth and my true like identity in Him, like during that time. So I definitely was happy to not be grinding as much, but it definitely was like an up and down battle with that mix of like really missing it and feeling lost for probably a good year when, once track ended for me. So.
Yeah, and then you kind of were on the up and up as you graduated, and then you started working as a project manager right after you graduated, right?
Yeah, so I moved to Dallas in July of 2024. At that time, like my 5th year of school, I still trained a lot and did some road races. I started posting content on like social media, and so kind of the idea for coaching, and in some ways, like, hey, I've gained this knowledge over the past 10 years. I'd love to share it now. That kind of all started in that spring, summertime, and then I moved down to Dallas and started working, as a project manager in July of 2024. So just hit my 2 years with the company, and kind of that like full on like adulting had started kind of in that time of life. So.
Yeah, no, I went back to look at some of your Instagram and saw, all the races that you did in 2024, which was pretty amazing. What was the first race that you did after, switching over to just signing up for races?
Yeah, it was in January of 2024, and it was a 10-mile race. And this was coming off of like 3 months where it was cold. I
Yeah,
was getting up early. Like I just, in some ways, there was a lot of fuel of just like still feeling like I had something to prove. And I think
yeah,
that spring of 2024, I did a 10-mile race, I did a 10K, I ran my first half, and then did a 5K. And it was
yeah,
like those 4 races, I won all four. And in some ways just was like so fueled to like, man, I still feel like I have so much to give, and I'm in, this great shape. I don't have a job yet. In some ways it felt like, man, I can kind of train like a pro runner here. And so those were the first few races, got picked up by like a local running team to run for them, which was super cool. And in some ways saw the power of like the running community in a different space, because I was so used to track meets, and it's very solo. It's
yeah,
very, you're kind of in your own world, and then you go into these you go into a road race, and just the community I got to meet and talk to, and just the post race is a lot different in that setting, like most endurance races are when you're
yeah,
out of the like college athlete sphere. So.
yeah. And so you kind of alluded to it. You 2024, you were still in your your college shape, did you create a training plan for any of those races, or did you
Yeah.
just rip those races that you did in 24?
Yeah, I kind of in some ways was my own like guinea pig for just training of like, hey,
Yeah.
I'd love to start coaching. Let's try out these, let's try out some principles here. And so I built kind of a 12-week build for my half marathon. In some ways, I probably peaked a little too soon and was a little
Yeah.
banged up here and there, and learned some lessons from it. But I was pretty calculated with how I went about, creating the training plan and sticking to it. And in some ways, was my own accountability for that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so I also saw that you did a high rocks and triathlon. When did those
Yeah.
come into the timeline?
Yeah, so I did a triathlon fall of 2024. I was in
Okay.
Texas, so got to Dallas, met a good friend of mine who's a personal trainer and had done an Ironman. And so we started to train together a little bit, and he let me use his bike actually, which was huge. And ended up doing the triathlon October time of 2024. And that kind of started this like challenge for myself to do some sort of new race or visit like a new state each year. And so the triathlon was what I did in 2024. In 2025, I did the high rocks, and I'm not a CrossFit guy. Like I'm purely running. I got into lifting more last year, but a good buddy of mine in Tennessee had convinced me to do this, and so we go up to Boston and like do the race. And I did a lot of lifting and I did a lot of running, but I did not do a lot of both together. The same way that you do the bricks for like for the Ironmans and for triathlons, you need a similar style workout to crush the high rocks. And I stepped into that and I fully cramped up in my legs about halfway through, finished the race, and actually ended up with rhabdo, if you've heard of that before. So I was in the ER after. Yeah. So it was kind of a scary moment where I definitely pushed a little too hard. But, I had a guy there that was telling me like, hey, I can't stop. So, I had a guy that was out there as my teammate. So in some ways I kind of felt like, I've got to finish this for the group. But yeah, that was definitely like definitely an eye-opening experience, and like helped me kind of redefine how I wanted to treat health and fitness, from here on out, especially now that I'm not in the athlete sphere anymore. And, I'd like to have the longevity piece there too.
Yeah. So you were essentially literally pushed to failure.
Yeah.
Which is what high rocks will do. And to kind of pull at high rocks a little bit, when you talk about high rocks with people who are, in the community, they like to say, what I've heard someone say is like, it's a running event with some stations in between. So it's built more for runners that, develop strength and get stronger at those exercises. Do you feel like you could dabble into high rocks, or are you going to try to stay in the road racing?
I probably will stay in the road racing scene. I think high rocks was cool to try out. I think I underestimated the strength portion. Like I think the running portion's there, but it's the lactic threshold that you need. Like there has to be the strength side where you're doing really hard workouts. It could be like an all out 400 or so, just things that are really pushing, that limit and getting your body used to having to perform when your heart rate is high. I think that's a lot of it too, is it's a lot of like zone 4, zone 5 work. And a lot of the times with running, that's just not the way that training's geared for that. So it was definitely a shock to my system. And I might do one again, but for the most part, I'm going to stick to road racing.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And road racing comes with a lot of training. And so after you have done all those races, did you feel like you became whole after, finishing your college career, or did you feel like it was still a difficult transition from college sports?
I still feel like it was difficult. And I think the high rocks was a big shift to basically reset how I viewed the road racing now. Instead of like, I'm chasing after a failed dream, I'm living in the ghost of my past. It's, hey, I get to go out here and push myself and run hard. And regardless the time, like just being able to go out and like compete and go complete a race, like that's enough for me to be, happy and joyful and grateful for the chance to run. And so I think that's been my aim now, where I don't have any time goals. I'm doing a half marathon out in Boulder in September. And for that, it's just like, go have fun. Like that is my goal with all my races now. I still train hard. I still want to push myself, but I've gotten out of the mindset of I'm trying to prove something. And I think that has helped me now have a more sustainable approach to road racing. And I think a lot of people can maybe fall into a pitfall if they aren't careful. If their goal with running or with road racing is I'm trying to prove myself, I'm trying to numb out from pain in other areas of my life. Like, I think for me, it has to be a posture of gratitude. And this is a gift and I get to do it. And I think if that is your, approach to it, it will be way more enjoyable and you'll probably do it for longer because you aren't trying to you aren't playing against yourself in some ways. I think that can sometimes happen with runners of like, we're going to mentally callous, our minds. And in some ways it's like, it gets kind of a David Goggins approach that I don't think is very friendly or kind to yourself and just kind of beat you down. So to answer your question, I think that race was kind of a switch into more of the mindset that I have now. And that allows me to continue to do it and truly just have fun.
Yeah, no, I love that mentality. I think I saw you also, you paced a local 5K, was
Yep.
that?
Yep.
And so it's cool to see the transition from high level competing at the college level, still some high level running, because I have seen some of your times, like that's some high level speed right there. But then, transitioning your mentality to, hey, let's just go have fun. Let's go pace others. Let's do this for the community. Let's do this for myself because I get to do this, which is super cool. And I love that.
1,000%. Appreciate it.
So before we talk about some of the things you're doing, I want to pull the thread on what you had mentioned for, building your own training plan.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit, in some details of like what that build looks for you, and then talk about maybe, hey, how you've changed from that first plan that you built to now.
Yeah. I like to have a very simple structure. It's simple, but it's not easy. I think a lot of people want this like flashy approach. And the reality is to be a good runner, it's showing up. It's putting in the mileage. It's not anything crazy. And so for me, it was, hey, I'm always taking 1 day a week off. I'm going to run 6 days. I'm going to have a long run. I'm going to have a workout. The rest of them are easy mileage where I'm going to try to not even look at the watch and just go off a feel. I think in this like age of data and metrics, we've like lost the ability to have the barometer of how we truly feel. And so we outsource that to like a sleep score or to to our watch says that I'm in the green. So I'm good today, instead of on those easy runs, learning to be more in touch. Cause I'm someone who's done that. Of like, I wore a Root for a while in college. I've got my Garmin. It's really easy to let those things kind of dictate, oh, well, this is how I feel. Instead of on those easy days, this is a chance to be more in tune with your body and be able to define how you truly feel. And so very big on easy days, easy. And then we hit our hard days hard. So I'm doing some sort of tempo, some sort of strength endurance workout. I usually do that Tuesdays, and then I would do my long run and then would try to progress that. I was also big on the strength side. So, I'm doing 1 to 2 full body lifts, some sort of compound movements. I like to do a lot of hip mobility, glute strength. Part of my back injury came from a lack of core stability. And so a lot of the rehab that they did for me there has kind of like swung now into my training, the things that I'm doing a few times a week, doing a lot of core, the small things that I think for a lot of runners is the first thing to go. It could be foam rolling. It could be, it could be the fueling side. I try to have a holistic approach. That's probably, and that leads into the next thing of like the biggest difference between how I'm training now versus how I'm training then was I'm reading my body more. So if there's a week where it's like, hey, this is popping up, I'm okay to take 2 to 3 days off instead of trying to push through it. I'm a lot more intentional with how I fuel, with how I hydrate. I mean, the amount of times in college that I would go on runs with no food and no drink beforehand and somehow crank out, 10 plus miles. I don't know how I can't do that now. And so I'm big on the hydration. I'll take some form of like electrolytes prior to my runs, of fueling well with protein and all the macronutrients when I'm done. It's just it's the little things that I call them it's like the 1%ers that they make a huge difference when they're compounded as you go throughout a 10 to 20 week build. But oftentimes they're skipped over. And so that's a lot of kind of what builds my training plan now, based on the race is what my mileage is going to be at. I'm not doing anything crazy at the moment. I think this week I'm on pace for like 30 miles to where I'm like, hey, I'm slowly building back. Because I did take some time off this spring and I've just kind of slowly built back. And uh, that's kind of how my training looked. And then some of the changes that I try to implement now.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I feel like, there was at times you were talking about myself with, my Garmin, my sleep score in the green and the red. And it was like, yep, that's me, that's me, that's me. But it took an injury to go back and be like, okay, like let's listen to my body and not the
Mhm.
data
Yep.
that's on my
Yeah.
Garmin.
1000%. Yeah.
So
Which is easier
it's
said than done.
yeah,
And
it's hard.
yeah.
It takes time, which depending on your lifestyle, you may have or you may not. And if you're going to choose between being on time to work or something and getting that extra 10 minutes of foam rolling or 5 minutes of foam rolling, it's a tough battle.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of why, for the clients that I coach now, I do a lot of questions on like, what is your lifestyle? What are the commitments that you have? If you have these goals, then you need to understand that it's either going to be one or the other. So be okay with, hey, your running may not go as well as you'd like if you weren't able to dedicate the time toward this. But at the same time, these are more important priorities than a road race. So like, just know, hey, it's going to take longer for you to get to X goal if this is your time constraints. And so I think just setting the expectations is always helpful because everyone wants to run fast now. Are there people that can show up for 6 months and show up when it's not fun to run or when it's early and you're tired? That's what builds the bricks to be successful and to have, the house of fitness by the end.
Yeah, no, that is one thing I feel that I am good at is managing my expectations. So if I go into a training block and I know that, hey, I didn't run as many miles as I think I should, I kind of say, hey, like within a training block, I will change my goal. Maybe it's not 5 minutes faster than my PR. Maybe it is just a second faster than my PR. And so I think that's a really good thing as a coach to do for your clients, which is help them manage expectations, because if you don't, it just messes with your mentality and your brain, and you're just like, hey, I'm not doing well, and then you just start spiraling, which is not what we want for our runners.
And in some ways, the same way that I had someone who was able to see potential in me, being able to have someone who can pump the brakes for you. I think a good coach knows how to say, like, again, it's managing the expectations. It's in some ways, it's bringing you back down sometimes. Because I think as runners, we get in our heads and we have this vision of how we want things to go. And we kind of need someone to sober us up at times and tell us like, hey, it's fine. Like, here's where we're at. Like, here's what we can go do. Here's what we can control. And I think a good coach knows how to manage that the right way.
Yeah, of course. I truly believe in that. And so you talked about that you're kind of in a enjoy the run type of mentality. What race do you have any goals or any races that are coming up next on the calendar?
I'm going to Boulder in September to do a half.
That's right.
There's a
You
buddy of
did
mine
mention
who
that.
who like lives out there, and there's really no goal with that. It's just to go out there and have fun. Next summer, I'm aiming to run my first marathon, and
Okay.
I'm gonna try to go up to Grandma's in Duluth, Minnesota.
Yep.
I've got a goal to hit all 50 states by age 30, and
There you
I
go.
just hit state 34 in June because I did a 10K in Maine. And
Nice.
so most of my trips now, I like to do some sort of road race.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. I was up there in Acadia National Park and
Oh, that's
just,
great.
it was a great time. It was my
Yeah.
first race since the High Rocks. And it was just a great, it was a great atmosphere. And kind of with next year's race, the goal is to build the volume up to run a marathon. And that would be a new state for me and a beautiful time of the year to go run up there. So that's kind of the like main goal is I'd like to do a marathon by next year.
And Duluth is, from what I understand, I'm not a type of runner that is trying to run Boston Marathon qualifying times, but Duluth, from my understanding, is a race that
Yep.
people will go
Mhm.
to run a Boston qualifying
Yep.
time. Is that something that you're interested in, or is this still kind of, enjoy the marathon for the first time and see what happens?
I think I will have a goal to try, to go and qualify. I think a lot will depend on how training goes.
Yeah,
But I'll set multiple goals for a
yeah,
race. So
of
like, here's
course.
my dream goal, and so if I could be close to 240, I'd be really, really happy. And then from
Yeah.
there, it's, hey, if I could go sub 3, just having, because I've never run one. So,
Sure.
you know, the floor for me would just be, hey, if I could just finish, and then it's,
Yeah.
hey, here's some other things along the way.
Yeah.
But the main goal would be to go and go in Boston qualify. My granddad ran at Boston, ran at Chicago, he ran New
That's
York.
cool.
So being able to see the pictures of him doing that and talk to him about it, he's one of my biggest, forms of inspiration, and just a big role model for me. So I'd love to go do that and get to talk to him about it. So Boston's definitely a goal for that.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And I'm excited to see the build up to that as you make it to grandma's, because that would be exciting. And
Yeah.
I've been to Boston to watch the marathon, and it's an incredible race.
Yeah, I'd love to get out there. I've been to Boston and seen the finish line. I just was like, I'd love to come out here and actually go run it
Yeah.
at some point. So
Yeah.
that's definitely on the docket of goals.
Okay. We'll be rooting for you then.
Thank you.
And so before we transition to some of the things that you're doing outside of running, what do you think you have struggled with the most in this period of transition to now when it comes to, fitness as a whole?
I think coming to terms with, I will probably not be as fast as I once was. Like
Yeah.
I look back at some of the Strava posts and some of the times of when I
Yeah.
was running at that, pace and doing that distance, and having to come to terms with, like, I will probably not be as fast as I once was, and seeing a lot of people that are getting into running now and are hitting that stride up to their fastest times. And for me, being at a place where I'm like, I don't think I'm going to run faster. And in some distances, right, I've not done a marathon. Like there's still the ability to do that. But I think about, the track, and I think about, more of the faster stuff. And just being at a place where I'm like, and I can feel the difference too. That's what I think is in the last 3 years. Like I can just feel a difference from where I was then to where I was now. And that is sometimes a tough pill to swallow, of letting that version of yourself go. So
Yeah, and it's crazy because you kind of alluded to it. Like myself, I've only been doing these distances for about 4 years, but I still have room to grow and peak, even though they're slower times. But you've been fast for a long time, and you've kind of alluded to that you've passed your peak. But it's crazy to think about that. We're two different runners with two different mindsets, but the speed is not the same, but we're in different paths, and it's a path that we're both taking and trying to make amends with, as we build as runners in the future.
yeah, 1,000%.
And so now we can transition to some of the things that you're doing outside of
Mhm.
running.
Yeah.
You've talked to this a little bit, but you're a coach.
Yes.
So what type of clientele do you bring in as a coach? Are
Yeah.
you elite runners, casual runners? What does that look like?
So I've kind of got a mix. On one hand, I do speed and agility training for kids at a local high school. We'll do a few sessions in the morning, I'll have kids from like third grade up to high school. And so that for them, it's all types of sports too. And so it's been really cool, just because a lot of the speed training that I did do in the 800 and drills that we did are the same things that I've been working with these kids. And it's been really fun. It's helped my communication. It's helped me get to pour into these kids, because there's kids there that or have got their cleats on and they're trying to get ready for their soccer season, and then you have some distance kids there, and so it kind of gives me a wide range to work with, and I really love that high school age range, just because I had a really good coach that poured into me, and so I think that just tends to be the thing, right? Like in some ways, I was poured into well in those middle school to high school years. I'd like to do the same. So that's one side of my training that I've been doing. The other one that I've been working is more the endurance space, and so I have several clients that are doing road races. I would say they're more the like casual to intermediate. I'm personally not looking to coach the elite runners. That's not personally what and this is kind of the brand that I've been starting. It's like I want to help people find joy in their running journey, and I love being able to be there at the start and kind of that middle phase. I think that people that have hit that elite point, I think there's a different type of coaching that's needed there. Where I think the people that are just beginning need that confidence and need that structure and need someone to say, I can see down the road because I've been there. Trust me. And so it's been fun to coach that range of people that like have some goals, are disciplined, are driven, but they just need a little bit of structure and just need someone who's pouring into them. And so I've got several guys that are training for Houston, for the marathon. Um, I've got another kid who's training for cross country. I've got a guy who's trying to break 20 in the 5K. And so it's been awesome. I mean, I've prayed a lot just to be just to have this chance. Yeah, and I've had the idea. This door was kind of open in the last 2 months or so when I've started to get clients, and it was actually my time off social media, which was kind of funny. But man, coaching has been, I think that has helped me transition very well because the focus is no longer on me. And so I'm able to channel that competitive energy that I once had for my own performance into somebody else. And it's a really gratifying feeling to be able to see someone else hit that unlock when they reach a certain point or crush a workout or like, man, I've never ran this fast before. And so that's part of the reason I've loved pacing too, is being able to be there for somebody else. I think it's in some ways I think it's more fruitful. I think you get a lot more joy and happiness from that posture, and it's been a blessing for me.
Yeah, no, I love everything about that. You're impacting young athletes. You're helping, old guys like me maybe try to break 20 for the first time, and it's such a wide variety of people. When you really think about it, the elites are a small percentage, maybe
Mhm.
10% of the runners who are running. And then you're working with, the rest of the 90%, and then, other high schoolers. And so that's such a good thing and a good mentality, especially when your mentality is like, hey, someone treated me well, let me take care of someone
Yeah,
else.
1,000%.
um, and which probably is also why you're taking this role as a youth leader in your church. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was blessed to have a small group leader from the time I was in eighth grade until my senior year of college. And so it was like same core group of guys, really blessed with that community back in Tennessee. And so coming to Dallas, I was really challenged to not only find that community again, but be able to disciple. Like I was discipled for so long. I'd love to disciple, a group of kids. And so joined a church called Eastside here in Dallas back in January 2025, and then started as a youth leader last June. And so, each Wednesday night, we've got about, 10 boys in our group that, we'll have kind of our large group, which is 6th to 12th grade. We'll play some games, we'll do some worship, there's a sermon, and then we'll break out into our smaller groups. And so the group of boys that I have is going into 7th grade this year, and I have about 10 of them. And it's been awesome to not only spend time there, but go and watch their sports games and get closer with their families. And it's been cool. I think when I was in college, life was all about me. And I think the athlete mentality can kind of like push you inward to where like it's all about me. And I think that resulted in me being very depressed and very anxious. And so having things where there's a purpose outside of myself to be, to be tethered to, I think there's a lot of joy that comes from that. And so being able to be like a youth leader, and it's a volunteer role, there's a lot of weeks and days where I'm like, it's been a long day of work. The last thing that I want to go do is go and wrangle these wrangle these boys.
Yeah.
With my role, it was a lot of travel the last year, so I'd get off a plane on Wednesdays and I'd go straight to youth. And so there was a lot, but I knew that was what I needed more than going back to my apartment by
Yeah.
myself and just vegging out there. It's been very, very rewarding to have something to pour into. And so I've been really, really blessed by the chance to do that. And it's also like, it's fun to be around that age where like
Yeah.
you kind of are reminded that like life gets so serious when you're around adults a
Mhm.
lot, and
Yeah.
there's bills and there's work and you get off these meetings and it's just, and so to go and just laugh with some kids and play games, and it kind of brings you back down to earth a little bit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I love that. It's such a great mindset to take care of those who you could change their life trajectory with
yep.
just one session. So it's pretty awesome. And the next thing that we'll talk about is you wrote a book.
Yeah, I
And
did.
we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. You wrote a book and you wrote about some of your experiences in college. Do
Mhm.
you want to talk about, what that book, how that came to
Yeah,
fruition?
yeah. So, that last race had happened, and about a week later, at that time I was going to therapy, and I was talking with my therapist and just talk about some ways to, deal with this sport that was a part of my life for the last 10 years. And I started to journal, and I was on a flight, and I journaled the introduction to the book. And with the book, there was a lot of iterations, and it went through revisions. One thing that stayed word for word the entire time was the introduction, because it captured the emotion that was felt. And so I started this journal, and was like, man, it'd be cool to write a book about these 4 years. And so I kind of made an outline. This was in April of 2023 of kind of what I thought the book could look like. And for the next probably 2 years, I just would chip away at it. I moved here to Dallas. At that time, I was living alone. I hadn't met a lot of people yet, and so I had a lot of free time. And so I would just write. And in June of 2025, I got connected to a publishing company in Nashville, and kind of pitched them the idea. They helped me self-publish it. So most authors are self-published. Not a lot of authors go the hybrid route. So basically, I got the same services from a publisher that they would get someone that they were taking on in-house, but I was self-published. So I'm having to fund it, but they don't take any cut on the back end. So it was on me to market it and to get the book out. And so went through, 4 rounds of editing with them from June until December, which was kind of, wild time, because last year I had the High Rocks thing. I was, gone a third of the year with work travel. There's just a lot going on. So to write this book on, most of my time writing was on flights and in hotels, just because I was gone so much. But, my book, it's called Against the Clock. I was wanting to peel back the layers on what the experience was truly like, to run in college, and also just to encourage and inspire people that we only have so much time. Let's make the most of the opportunities. I thought I had so much time, and then it was like, boom, it's done. And that's a lot of the advice that for people that are in it, I think this book is helpful for that. I'm planning to write a second book on the transition to life after, as I think that's also a large percentage of people that I don't see a lot of books that are targeted, or conversations that are targeted toward that audience. But this book is like for the college freshman that is in a whole new world and is kind of lost, and they're playing their sport and they're drowning in homework, and they're just like, I'm 18 years old and this is all new to me. And so I think a lot of it is, I think a lot of people have shared experiences, but no one wants to be vulnerable and share them. And so there's some vulnerable moments in that book where I share some tough things, and some things that were struggles of mine, so that whoever else is out there that might be going through that, or has felt that but never felt like they could say anything, that could help them feel seen, and also feel encouraged. Because it's a lot of people think it's super cool and there's a bunch of clout, and there's great benefits, but it's a grind. It's really challenging if you don't have the right mindset about it. So that's what I hope this book can do. It came out in December of last year, and man, I've been just very blessed by just the feedback, and had a couple book parties for it. I actually, this was there's a girl that goes to my church who painted this for one of them. And so very, very kind of her to do that. And I just keep that up on the wall just as a way to be like, man, I'm grateful that I followed through on that.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. It is an incredible, point of view to publish. And I think similar to why I have this podcast, which is, there's a lot of transitions with college athletes, and it's important to put stories like yours out, because not everybody is the NFL bound, the NBA bound athlete, and so not everybody's story. I don't have any statistics. I was on a college football team, but I don't have any statistics to show for it. So not every athlete is what you see on TV, and so I think that's important to highlight. And I'm sure your book does a great job of getting people in the mindset of hey, this is how I need to move forward as an athlete in college.
1,000%. That's part of the reason, at the beginning of the book, I made it a dedication, and it was this is for, the grinders, the dreamers, the ones who never got their flowers. because I
Yeah.
think there's a large percentage of college athletes that leave the campus and they aren't the ones who are recognized or
Hmm.
who are on TV or who scored the touchdowns or had the home runs. And they were there and did the same work and grinded the same way, but didn't get like that's in some ways, I think, even tougher is like when you
Hmm.
didn't get the payoff and when there wasn't the like ride off into the sunset to end the career. That's what
Yeah.
I think is super challenging and what I wanted this book to show of like it was really cool. It was also really challenging and like here's the
Yeah.
right mindset to approach to be grateful for it all.
Yeah. And so we've talked about a lot of different things, but what we haven't talked about is balance. So right,
Mm.
we alluded to like you got off a plane and went straight to, an event. What does balance look like for you?
Yeah, I think this year is the first time that I have really slowed down enough to try to create like space is my word this year.
Yeah.
And the whole High Rocks thing that like happened last year, that was a lot of what really forced me to like I have to slow down and like
Right.
create balance. And so I'm someone that I set a lot of boundaries. I kind of
Hmm.
have my commitments that are like a big part of my life. You know, that's my job. That's my faith and how I'm involved at church. That's my friends. That's this coaching business, and it's my
Yeah.
family. And like those are my five big things that I'm saying yes to. And outside
Hmm.
of that, most of the time it's going to be no, especially if it's in a busy season.
Yeah.
I'm just starting my coaching business. Most of my free time is spent with that, and
Yeah.
so it's a lot of saying no. It's in some ways I'm missing out. And then I also, on Sundays is kind of my true Sabbath. Like I'm off my
Yeah.
phone. I'm gonna read. I'm gonna do something that's restful and that recharges me. I'm not gonna spend it trying to like check more things off the task list. And so I am someone who's very like when I'm grinding, I'm working really hard, but I'm also gonna rest as hard. And I think that's even good advice for running. Like we're
Yeah.
gonna work hard, but we're gonna recover harder. And I think you have to
Hmm.
have that in life as well and at the same time being able to be flexible. So the same rhythms that are present right now for me, it might change with the seasons and being mentally flexible enough to um, move those around. Because I think with athletes, we like to have these guardrails that we stay in between, and it's the hard and fast rule that never changes. And I think sometimes it takes like a reset and checking, hey, is this the best for this season? And so
Yeah.
that changes from time to time. And that's, I think that's part of balance is living in the tension of discipline and fun. So,
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
yeah.
No, I love that, and I think people have a hard time saying no,
Yeah.
which is good that you're picking up on. But the last thing that I want to bring up is I'm wearing this hat because I know that you have formed a relationship.
Yeah.
You are an athlete with Bound Running Co., which is a young and upcoming running company
Yeah.
um, from Katie Baska,
Yep. Yep.
a former runner, former Olympic trial
Yep.
runner,
Yep.
which is awesome. And I don't know, I think she hit my algorithm with a couple, really cool stories, and then I've followed ever since.
Yeah.
So I love what she's doing. But can you talk about your relationship with Bound Running Company?
Yeah. So I actually, at that 10-mile race was the first time that I met Katie. Cause she, I think won for the girls. And so we talked after, cause I believe the running group that she was running for, I started running for. Her husband ran at Tennessee, so I knew him because I went and saw him some for physical therapy and his name's Andy, while I was still in Knoxville. And so when she started Bound, she reached out to me, I want to say early 2025, and was like, hey, we're going to do a photo shoot. Would love for you to come out and do this. And this was in May when I did the photo shoot and started as one of their Bound builders, where basically I was posting, had a few hats from them and like some singlets. And, so in all my races that I've done, I still wear the Bound gear. And it's been really cool because Knoxville's needed that for some time. It has these like smaller run groups of like the elite guys or the people that are up at 5 a.m. But you don't have this like kind of catch all brand that I think you can identify a lot of different groups with. And Knoxville needs something that's more, that feels trendy, that has that fun feel to it. And I think a lot of the events that Bound's doing, with us, like pacing the 5K and she's doing a great job of getting the brand out there. It's been really fun to work with them when I'm back in town. Because I'll usually I'll pace the 4th of July 5K and the turkey trot. And so usually I'll throw on the bound kit for that. And it's just always a fun time to see the group. And there's a lot of those events in Knoxville that they're able to take advantage of. And so, I've kind of been able to stay close with that and, try to help plug in, as much as I can. And, I'm someone that like loves to, help shout people out. And so, I've tried to use my platform to help share bound stuff. And it's been cool to see that, see the platform grow for them. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I love what they're doing. I love the 4th of July singlet too.
Oh yeah, it's pretty sick.
That was a
Yeah.
pretty sweet one.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's really cool to see, you and Bound grow. I'm excited to see what, Katie brings up and comes up with next.
Yeah. Yep.
And so as we wrap up, I just want, and I ask this of all the athletes that I talk to, what piece of advice would you give to, and I know your book probably has a good amount of things, and so we won't spoil the book, but
yeah,
what advice would you give to some athlete that's getting ready to transition from their college sport to the real world? What would you tell them now as they get ready for that?
Man, I would say try as best as you can to find a community where you're fully known for who you are, not just what you do. I think as an athlete, you're kind of known for what you do. I mean, there's been a lot of conversations where I meet somebody and they're like, "Oh, you're the runner." And I'm like, "Yeah," but there's also a lot more to me. And I think because of that, there's a lot of athletes that are perfectly fine with living in the silo as like, they're the track runner, they're the basketball player, and that's who they are. Like what they do is now blended with who they are. And people just know them for their sport. And then eventually what happens is 20 years pass by and it's like, that's cool that you did that, but like there's more to life. And so I think a lot of what's helped me transition is letting that thrill go of like, that was an awesome season of my life. I love to talk about it. If people ask me about it, I'll chat. But man, it's been fun to figure out who I truly am outside of my sport and to show that to other people. So most times I don't tell people that I ran track in college, like unless it's brought up. Because I'm like, hey, I want you to know me for who I am. And track was like a cool piece of that, but it's not like the main thing in my life. So that's the main piece of advice I would give. One, I mean, for athletes that are in college, because I think that's big then too, but especially as you leave, find somewhere where you're known for who you are as a person.
Yeah, no, I love that. We all have to leave the college sport at some point. And so to go into a community and be known for who you are is important because, then you start to find your worth outside of that sport.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've pretty much wrapped it up. Preston, where can people reach out to you? Where can they find your book?
Yep.
Give us all the details.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at pruthruns. There's links in the bio that have my book, so you can buy that there. Pretty soon, my Instagram page for my running brand will be out, which is called Run Yours. So my coaching brand is going to be from that. So that Instagram will be dropping soon. But for now, you can find me at P Runs. Feel free to just shoot me a message or anything, and the book link's in the bio. So
awesome. I think the book link will definitely be in the bio, and I think I'm going to have to buy the book as well to see the nuggets that we didn't talk about today.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks so much for that.
Of course. Well, Preston, this has been an awesome conversation. Thanks again for coming on the Retired Athlete Mentality Podcast, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good, man. Appreciate you having me on.